Hello, everybody. So there's so much going on right now. I don't even know where to begin. I think let's start out in London, where President Trump and Melania are honoring late Queen Elizabeth II at Windsor Castle. Okay, so this is live right now from the Hill. Hi, Spirit. Hi, Laura. So let's head on over to merry old England and see what is going on over there across the pond. Hi, John. There's not really any sound, but that's Windsor Castle. And that long driveway you see going towards Windsor Castle, I believe is called the Long Walk. I went to Windsor Castle when I was very early in my career, and I was just in my I was 24 years old when I went there and had the trip of my life. Hi, Kenneth. But anyway, that is Windsor Castle that you're looking at right now. President Trump is there. You can see a bunch of animals milling about and some people. But they're showing us different versions of, wait. Okay, there we go. Now we're on the side of Windsor Castle. Hi, Holly. I'll turn this down because there isn't really anything to hear. But having been to Windsor Castle, I do have an idea of what we're looking at. Trying to orient myself. I believe this is the side of Windsor Castle. When I was there, I did not go into the castle itself. I actually just went into the castle's dollhouse, which was really cool because it gave me a very good perspective on the castle, seeing it in a dollhouse replica. I believe it was Queen Victoria's dollhouse. Anyway, that's what you're looking at right now, Windsor Castle. Okay, I'm gonna mute that one and let's see what else they have going on. Oh, we've got JD Vance is now on the scene, so let's go back a little bit. He just went live, so we're gonna go live with JD Vance. All right, you guys. Whoops.
Thank you guys, please. Thank you all. Well, it's great to be here in the great state of Michigan. I always loved coming to Michigan on the campaign trail, and I'd always said, you know, the most dangerous place maybe this Ohio State grad visited was Michigan on the campaign trail, but you all were always kind and friendly and good to me. We love you too. Thank you, sir. It's good to see you again, man. I'm not gonna do that here. Somebody yelled out OH. I'm not doing that here. Don't insult your hosts is the basic thing that I learned in politics. Let me just say a few things, a few words of gratitude. First of all,
look at the shirt that guy's wearing behind him.
A great congressman who fights for working people in the state of Michigan, Tom Barrett. Where are you, Tom? Thank you so much for what you do. We talk a lot about the working families' tax cuts. We talk about no taxes on overtime, which we are proud to deliver. No taxes on tips, which we are proud to deliver. The lowest taxes that we've had in this country in a very long time because Tom Barrett went to Washington and fought for the people of this district. Thank you so much, Tom, for everything that you do. I want to thank, of course, the leadership of this great American manufacturer. Hatch was founded in 1952 by two brothers. Where are we at here?
By the way, he is in Howell, Michigan right now.
Thank you, guys. Stand up. Come on. Let's give him a round of applause.
I think it's a factory for metal workers or something. But he's in Michigan at the moment. Just so you know.
Thank you, guys. I got a little tour with Daniel Craig and Wally earlier today. Thank you guys so much. I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name, Wally. I don't want to insult you or look like an idiot in front of the TV cameras, but you guys, this is a great facility. So it started, of course, manufacturing parts for M1 rifles for the American warfighter, and now it manufactures all kinds of automotive components that we rely on each and every single day.
Automotive components.
And one of the things...
It's a manufacturing plant for automotive components in Michigan. That's where he is.
And one of the things they told me is that business got maybe a little tough, a little uncertain, when they had a president of the United States who was obsessed with telling everybody to drive an electric vehicle, because too many of those electric vehicle components were not made in America. But now that we are leaning in to great American-made automobiles, Hatch is doing better, the American auto worker is doing better, and President Trump and I are proud to fight for you each and every single day. I've also got to thank our incredible Secretary of Labor. You just heard from her, Secretary Chavez DeRemer. Let's get a round of applause for the great Secretary of Labor. Now, she is a very, very interesting person. She has got a great career. She had a great career in Congress, but I have never met anybody on either the Republican Party or the Democrat Party who is more obsessed with fighting for American workers every single day. She wants our workers to have the best training. She wants our workers to have the best benefits. She wants our workers to have the highest wages. And thanks to her work, we're getting closer every single day to being the most pro-worker administration in the history of the United States of America. So thank you, Madam Secretary. We also have Michigan GOP Chair Jim Runstad. Where's Jim at? Jim, thank you for everything that you're doing. Now, Jim did such a good job during the last election in 2024 that the previous GOP chair, Pete Heckstra, is now our ambassador to Canada. So if you do a really good job, man, you might just get a promotion. Who knows? But he's doing a great job here in Michigan, and we're going to fight with him for the next couple of years to make sure that we're electing candidates who actually serve the interests of Michiganders and serve the interests of the American worker, and that's what we're here for, and we'll never forget it. So I want to say just one thing about my friend Charlie Kirk. I want to talk about Charlie Kirk for a little bit. And the last group I want to have be recognized here is we have got a lot of kids, and I hate to call you kids, but when you're 41 years old, you guys are kids. TPUSA is a great organization founded by my friend Charlie Kirk that takes the message of free speech and conservative values all over our college campuses here in the state of Michigan and elsewhere. And we've got some proud TPUSA folks here. Would you guys stand up and be recognized by the crowd?
Thank
we love you.
Thank you for doing that, JD. Kenneth, you have been everywhere and you have done everything. You're the best.
We love these kids and we love the organization that was founded by Charlie Kirk. And I know I speak for all of the kids behind me, all of the great TPUSA members and also the alums, that over the past 10 years, Turning Point USA has not just been an organization, it has been the fountain of a movement all across the United States of America. If you look at just the youth vote in 2024 and how much young voters shifted from Democrat to Republican from 2020 to 2024, Charlie Kirk created a movement. And that movement made Donald J. Trump the president of the United States, and it made me the vice president of the United States. I would not be here without Charlie.
And that's why they killed him. Right there. And I understand now they want to go after other young
But
people
Charlie
like
was an exceptionally talented individual. People don't realize how integral he was, how important Charlie Kirk was. He helped us staff the administration with solid people like Secretary Chavez DeRemer. He made sure that when we hired somebody, that it was a smart person, but it was also a kind and decent person. You see him at these college events and he would talk to anybody. He didn't care if you were a Democrat, a Republican, a liberal, a conservative, if you supported the Trump administration or not. He felt that the most important American political virtue was to just get out there and talk to our fellow Americans. And I hate to say that a week ago, he was doing what he did best, he was doing what he loved, and an assassin gunned him down for daring to say things that assassin thought were wrong or shouldn't be said. Well, I think I speak for every person in this room, and I think I speak for a majority of our fellow Americans when I say we do not attack or commit violence against people because we disagree with their ideas. We debate ideas, and we're going to keep on debating them in honor of the great Charlie Kirk for as long as I have a microphone. But the last thing I want to say about Charlie, my friends, is he was more than a political organizer, more
That's
than a
a
person
motorcycle,
who
by the
literally
way.
helped make me the Vice President of the United States. And I'll never forget it, Charlie, that I would not be here were it not for you. He was a good guy. He was a good friend. I mean, all of these people who have been involved in TPUSA, Turning Point USA, it wasn't just a debate society. It wasn't just a political organization. It gave these kids a sense of home and a sense of purpose in often very hostile places. If you were a young conservative or you were a young Christian and you were worried that a professor might give you a bad grade for being who you were, Charlie's Turning Point USA gave you a home. If you were worried that you had an idea that was maybe disfavored by your social group, if you were worried that you believed something that was just a little too controversial for a college campus, Turning Point USA gave you a home, it gave you friends, it gave you moral support, and that is what I think must live on in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death. I have friends who met a husband, a wife, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, who met the best man at their wedding at Turning Points USA because it was an organization of patriots dedicated to making this country the very best country that it could be. And I would like to think that whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, this basic idea of young people gathering to discuss and debate, that is the thing that we cannot let pass away just because the leader of Turning Points USA was gunned down by an assassin. And I want to let you know that whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, whatever your belief is, I will fight for your right to speak your mind. We reject political violence and we reject the crazy left-wing radicals that gunned down our friend Charlie Kirk. Let's talk to one another and not try to shoot each other down for disagreeing. One of the things that Charlie worked on very, very hard was the very bill that we're going to talk about today. I remember having so many phone conversations, so many text conversations with Charlie about how to make the bill better, about how to do more for working families. Because you know what, Charlie, he believed exactly what I believed and exactly what the President of the United States believed, that we have got to rebuild the American dream, especially for our young people, which is why this big, beautiful bill does so much to bring American manufacturing back to the United States of America. These working families tax cuts, they don't just cut your taxes, though they certainly do. They reward companies for building and investing in the United States of America. Because isn't it nice to have an administration that is fighting for the businesses and the workers that are building right here at home rather than shipping our jobs off to Asia or Mexico? We fought for no taxes on overtime and no taxes on tips because we want you to keep more of your hard-earned money. We fought for an increase to the child tax credit because we want to make it easier for young families to bring new life into this world and to raise that new life in security and prosperity and comfort. The working families tax cut is not just a big 1,000-page bill. It is an important part, maybe the most important part, to restarting the American dream in this country. Wouldn't it be nice to have a president, and now we do, who builds in America rather than rewards companies for shipping jobs overseas? Wouldn't it be nice to have an administration that actually gives you more of your hard-earned money rather than taking more of it for hard-earned or for government bureaucrats? Wouldn't it be nice to have an administration that fights for your ability to keep more money in your pocket? Wouldn't it be nice to have an administration that punishes corporations that ship our jobs overseas, but rewards businesses for building right here in the great state of Michigan? That is what we promised to do, and that is what we're doing every single day. Now, I don't know if you saw the headlines this morning, if you turned on the TV this morning, but the president right now is participating in a great state visit to the United Kingdom, our closest ally, of course, going back to the very beginning of our country when we didn't always agree very early on. But pretty much since then, they've been very close friends of the United States, about 200 years, our most important ally in the world. And the president is over there. And somebody asked me, would you rather be in England celebrating the state visit? I said, no, I'd rather be right here in the great state of Michigan where people are grilled and great products for the American people. So with all due respect to our great president and all due respect to the King of England, I am so proud to be right here where I am today, with all of you talking about all of the ways in which we can continue to build an America that works for normal Americans again. And that means a lot of things. Part of making this country work for you all is making sure you're safe in your communities and safe in your streets. And one of the proudest things the President of the United States has done in Washington, D.C. and in Memphis as of a couple of days ago is to send the National Guard to take back American streets. We deserve to be safe communities again, and that's what the President is making happen. And it's so funny, you go to these places and, you know, the TV cameras, very often the fake news media, all due respect to the fake news, we love them, even when we don't. They show up in these places and they put a microphone or a camera in front of somebody who they assume is a Democratic voter. And they say, what do you think about Donald Trump deploying these people to your city? And every single person says, it's a great idea. I just want to be safe. And we're glad the president is making that happen. So my one message to Governor Gretchen Whitmer here in the state of Michigan is, oh, come on. My one message to Gretchen Whitmer is, look, the city of Detroit we know has got some serious crime problems, and we know that it's the people in Detroit who suffer the most when crime is allowed to run rampant all over city streets. Gretchen, we are happy to send the National Guard to Detroit, Michigan. All you got to do is ask. We got to remember, the streets are safer when law enforcement is allowed to put the bad guys away. And just as we want to protect your job and we want to make sure you have a good wage when you work hard, we also want to make sure when you go home, you can enjoy your neighborhood and enjoy your community and safety. You know what else we want to do? We want to make sure that our young people stop dying of this terrible poison, this fentanyl and other drugs that are being brought in by these cartels. And I'll tell you a little story. I was talking to our great Secretary of Defense probably about a week and a half ago. And this was right after we lit up a narco-terrorist boat that was trying to bring drugs into the United States of America. And I got to tell you, I am a child of the war on terrorism era. I served, just as Tom did, in our military. I deployed to Iraq as a United States Marine, a young enlisted United States Marine. I am proud to have a president who is sending our military to light up the cartels that threaten our people in our own backyard. That's where the military belongs, if they belong anywhere. So I was talking to I said Secretary of Defense, but our new Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. And I was talking to Secretary Hegseth, and you know what he said? He said, you know what, Mr. Vice President? We don't see any of these drug boats coming into our country. They've completely stopped. And I said, I know why. I would stop too. Hell, I wouldn't go fishing right now in that area of the world. But that is what a military that is dedicated to its purpose and a commander-in-chief that is dedicated to the national good can do. If we just have our actual government fighting for the interests of Americans and nobody else, we can make this country safer, we can protect your jobs, we can make sure you've got the best wages anywhere in the world, and we can stop this terrible poison from coming into our country. We just needed a president who was willing to fight for you, and now we've got one. So let me leave you with this final thought here. Look, I grew up in a community. You heard Secretary Chavez de Rimmer mention this, that I grew up in a community where the American dream seemed to be disappearing, where the jobs were getting shipped overseas, where the factories were closing down. I remember driving around my hometown of Middletown, Ohio, and we'd see some abandoned factory, and my grandfather would tell me what used to happen there, what good jobs used to happen there, what good wages used to provide for families there. And I remember thinking, why is it like this? Why have our leaders ignored us for so long? Why are factories closing instead of opening up? Why are good jobs going to China when American workers deserve good jobs right here at home? And the answer was bad leadership. Just as our leadership chose crime, they also chose to ship your jobs overseas. Just as they chose to send our young men and women to foreign wars all over the world, they refused to stop the cartels that were operating right here in our backyard. And I believe our sacred promise and our sacred duty is to make this country even better for the next generation than it was for the generation that came before. That is why we're doing the things that we're doing. But I want to tell you, I'm never going to forget where I came from. I am never going to forget that I was a little boy who was worried about why the jobs were disappearing. I'm never going to stop fighting for the auto workers to have good jobs right here at home. I'm never going to stop. I'm never going to stop, and neither is the President of the United States, from fighting for your public safety, for your good wages. We're going to fight for when you send $1 to Washington, D.C., that we spend it wisely. We're going to fight for you to have low taxes. If you're working hard, we're going to fight for you to keep as much of your hard-earned money as possible. Because I believe that the American dream belongs to American citizens, not to illegal aliens, not to drug cartels, and it doesn't belong to foreign workers. It belongs to workers right here in the state of Michigan. So I hope you remember, when you're voting in 2026, you have a choice between somebody who tried to fight for the illegal aliens and somebody who tried to fight against the drug cartels. You've got a choice between somebody who is trying to get good law enforcement.
Whoa. What just happened? Oh, that's so weird.
In order to form a more perfect.
All right, we'll go over here.
Era, I served just as Tom did in our military here at home, and the answer was bad leadership. Just as our leadership chose crime, they also chose to ship your jobs overseas.
Sorry about that, guys.
Just as they chose to send our young men and women to foreign wars all over the world, they refused to stop the cartels that were operating right here in our backyard. And I believe our sacred promise and our sacred duty is to make this country even better for the next generation than it was for the generation that came before. That is why we're doing the things that we're doing. But I want to tell you, I'm never going to forget where I came from. I am never going to forget that I was a little boy who was worried about why the jobs were disappearing. I'm never going to stop fighting for the auto workers to have good jobs right here at home. I'm never going to stop.
Thank you.
And neither is the President of the United States, from fighting for your public safety, for your good wages. We're going to fight for when you send $1 to Washington, D.C., that we spend it wisely. We're going to fight for you to have low taxes. If you're working hard, we're going to fight for you to keep as much of your hard-earned money as possible. Because I believe that the American dream belongs to American citizens, not to illegal aliens, not to drug cartels,
Amen.
And it doesn't belong to foreign workers. It belongs to workers right here in the state of Michigan.
100%. This is what I voted for. This is what I voted for.
So I hope you remember, when you're voting in 2026, you have a choice between somebody who tried to fight for the illegal aliens and somebody who tried to fight against the drug cartels. You've got a choice between somebody who is trying to get good law enforcement.
Wow, so this happened again. Okay, that's really weird. Hi, Ozzy. So they just cut it off in the same place, and I'm not sure why. That's concerning me. It's really weird. I'm looking again for the live of JD Vance because he clearly wasn't done talking. That was the White House live feed, actually, Spirit. It does not make any sense. I'm not really sure what's going on here. RSBN, okay. Well, RSBN is doing the oversight hearing of the FBI with Kash Patel. So let me find the White House. Let's see. It is really very, very strange that that should happen. Okay. It's crazy, huh? So, well, I'm trying to fix this issue. President Trump's in England. That's interesting. Does anybody know, did Charlie Kirk's wife go with him to England? The White House. I'm just doing a search for the White House. Live feed. Live. Okay, it looks like we've got JD. Nope. Nope. It's not on right now. I don't know what's going on, but I don't like it. And I'll bet that that was on a bit of a delay too. Yeah, I haven't seen anything about Erica been there. I can't really imagine Erica going to England at this time. I mean, she's probably hunkered down with her babies, you know, and her family. Don't forget, those little kids don't understand what's going on. And they need their mom more than anybody. Okay, so live. I don't know what to tell you about this. I can't play the link that you sent me because it's on the phone and I'm already on the phone, so that will not work. But I was there. We can see what's... Yeah, they have totally taken JD Vance down. I'm looking up JD Vance. Vance speaks live in Michigan. Everything is down now. So I'm like really concerned that I don't know what's happened.
For those that are parents, you know exactly.
No, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, the White House channel is where it's at under live or videos, but it's not working right now. The White House channel is going back to home, back to live. And the White House channel just says we will be back shortly. So, for the White House again. The White House. Oops. I do a search with my voice. The White House. I don't know what to think, you guys. If you come on the show, by the way, and you don't have anything nice to say, why don't you go somewhere else and say it there? How about that? Can we have that agreement? Because seriously, you make yourself look so crazy when you say these weird things to me. Thank you, Spirit. Okay, right side broadcasting is also off the air. I'll show you guys what I'm looking at here, because this is what we're getting from right side, and that's supposed to be live. Go back to the live home. Bro, that's loud. Get rid of the next idiot, please. A lot of rude people. No manners. Okay, so that's England, where you can see the sun is already pretty much set in England. And there's nothing to see there either. Here, guys, get rid of these crazy people. I hate them. Sorry, I don't hate anybody, but I do hate it when people come on my show and say disgusting or stupid things. Yeah, block and report people like that, you guys. It's just uncalled for. Uncalled for. Okay, so here we are in merry old England, in Windsor Castle, Windsor, England. And it doesn't look like anything's going on there. So we'll go back here. Here is the White House channel, which if you go to the live, this is what you get. So that's not happening. Okay, England. And what's this over here? England, looking pretty dark. Okay, well. So if you were watching the England bits, they had a bunch of protesters, and every one of the protesters, by the way, had a sign that was clearly printed up for them. Nobody makes their own signs. I think they just pay them, they give them a sign, and they walk around. And it's funny because in England they had stuff saying no kings. Really, no kings? Is that the country where with the king? That didn't make any sense to me either. So exactly, Spirit, good job. Anyway, yeah, Ozzy, we are in for a bumpy ride. They are poking the bear, praying nobody takes the bait. Exactly. Because we're not the same people who one of us gets assassinated and then we go riot in the streets. That is not our way. It is not what we do. We pray to God. We talk to each other. We try to make sense of it all. Sometimes there is no making sense of what's happening in this world today. In fact, it is very disheartening to see these crazy people who will come on and just say the nastiest things to strangers. And oh yeah, look here's somebody who wants Democrats to not hire Republicans after viewing their social media. Too late, Anonymous, because that's what's happening to the Democrats right now, who have really nasty things to say about Charlie Kirk, and nobody wants to be around you. So you go ahead, you anonymous person, and you keep on keeping on. Thank you, Rich. I love that you love my hat. Yeah, so we're witnessing a great discernment happening, where the people who hate America the most are coming out with their hatred, showing us all who they are, showing us all what they want. It doesn't really go both ways, Anonymous, because we don't go out and riot and hurt other people. We don't silence you with guns and other violence. We don't use violence. We're not violent people. So, Anonymous, you can take your violence elsewhere. And yeah, it is a shame that he was the son of two MAGA parents. It's a shame that he got radicalized, and and just let his emotions take over. You know, that is a sad thing, and that is part of the problem of the left, is that they go after people who are vulnerable and full of emotions. So exactly, random. That's why anonymous is called anonymous, because they're a coward. Exactly. Thank you, random, for pointing that out. So, yeah, you know what? Actually, no cops were killed on January 6th. That is a lie. Um, there was a patriot who was killed in cold blood on January 6th. That's who got killed. And also another woman named Roseanne Boylan that nobody seems to ever talk about, who got killed on January 6th. And there were no cops killed on January 6th. That is a lie. Exactly. Thank you, Kevin. We know the truth, and you know, you guys come in and you put your 2 cents in, but we know what the truth is. So you can't fool us anymore. And you can't pretend that, you know, yes, and rest in peace, Ashley Babbitt. Thank you, Donna. That's right, Kevin. Don't forget Roseanne Boylan too, please. She also was killed, and they say that she had a drug overdose, but that is crazy because Roseanne was literally beaten by the police, and there were videos of that. And I actually heard, you know, people I know who talked about Roseanne's death, and I actually interviewed someone who tried to help her, and she died at the scene. So 2 patriots dead on January 6th. And I'm so tired of hearing about January 6th, and I really can't wait until the truth comes out and these people finally understand what's going on. I don't know if they ever will. I don't know. It's so hard. All right, I'm going back to see, yeah, the White House is not showing anything. And yeah, J.D. Vance's speech was cut off, and I don't know why. Let's look at X and see what is going on there. Sometimes you can find out stuff on X, sometimes not. And by the way, don't ever use Grok to tell you anything. Grok is completely unreliable. I find that out every time I try to use Grok. Although there are times where Grok is actually helpful, but if you really get into the weeds, Grok will get it wrong, and then when you tell Grok what was true, Grok will say, "Oh, that's true," and then it's crazy cake. So, yeah, what is the truth, Monica? Exactly. Nobody knows the truth. I know. Who knows anymore? It's just, the world is a crazy place, and some people say that we're just watching a movie. I don't know what to think anymore. Things that are trending on X right now: Trump's historic UK state visit with King Charles draws protests and protocol debate. And then you think about England and what a bloody mess that place is, where they've literally put immigrants over their own people. That's what the Biden administration did to us too. So we understand each other, but now it's America first. It's, unfortunately, England is not first. So I can't get anything to work right now. I don't know what's going on, but I have other things to do this afternoon, so I'm going to let y'all go. I really wanted to hear about Trump's tax cuts, and looks like that is not going to happen. Not right now, anyway. So I guess we will have to reconvene here if anything else comes in. And yeah, I'm an old lady, Zeus. Woo, woo, woo. I lived in the 80s. You did it. I love it. You're a Trump supporter and you think I'm repressed. What does that mean, Bob? And you know what, Bob? If you're a Trump supporter, why are you going after me? Like, can we not get along? Can someone not get along with us together? Like, I'm being attacked by everyone today. Even the Trump supporters. That's kind of crazy. Like, what's wrong with you? Why are you going after me? Like, what did I do? I'm just here trying to show you what's going on with the news. So I think you're probably not really a Trump supporter. I think you're a liar. Anyway, yeah, thank you, RR. It's okay. Nobody can hurt me because I'm only concerned about what the Lord thinks of me, not robots on YouTube. All right, and I know also who my real followers are, and I love you guys so much. And thank you to my mods for always helping to get rid of the haters. Yeah, Rogue, we know that, Ozzy. They're just silly. They're just silly. Hi, Monica. Hey, Monica, what time is it over there? 2:30 in the morning, maybe around there. You're up late. But it's good to see you. We have a lot of fans from Australia here on the Beach Report, and I love to see you guys. So welcome, Monica. Welcome. All right, you guys. Well, God bless America. That's right. 4 a.m. See, I know it's either like it's a 2-hour thing. I'm getting good with it though. So yeah, you're up either early or really late, Monica. Get some sleep, girlfriend. Anyway, welcome to the Beach Report, you guys. For all you patriots, I'm really glad you're here. And please come back and help me deal with these idiots, crazy people, robots, some of them, or they call them bots, and some of them are just AI. Wait, what's up, Spirit? Yeah, I am working. I am working on some good news articles right now. Oh, the Fed just lowered rates. What, really? Donna says, hey, what, you guys? Let me look. I'm having technical difficulties. I'm looking for the news. And we do try to show you the actual news, like these real hearings and stuff like that. RR, thank you so much. Hi, Leslie. Thank you for subscribing and liking my channel. I greatly appreciate it. Hi, Fox. Hey, gray muzzle. I love it. You have a gray muzzle. That's hilarious. That's awesome. What does that mean, quantum reality? Thank you, P. I'm glad you're here. Yeah. Okay. All right. The AP is live right now. So let's listen to what they're saying about the Fed. Okay. I'm going to turn it around. And we are back in business with the news. Live 2:30. What time is it? It is 2:30. Look at that. Let's see. No, and it's not ready yet. Not ready yet. Let's see what else we can find. So much news going on right now. It's crazy. It's going to be Jerome Powell. Oh, let's see. President Trump. Well, these are the English people. Let's see what they're up to. You guys, let me know when Jerome Powell comes on live. I don't know who these people are, but apparently they are in Windsor Castle. And who's that lady? She's got some big eyelashes. Looks like a kind of a receiving line. Yeah, you're right, Ozzy. They come in to run interference. That's what we need you guys for. If anybody wants to be a moderator, please let me know. I would welcome it right now. Heater install. Okay. Oh yeah, that's you, Spirit. Yeah, go deal with your stuff. You're good. Thank you. I've got backups. 30 minutes until President Trump comes on. Oh, really? President Trump himself. Interesting. Okay, I'm going to see what else is live right now. Oh, Jerome Powell's on. Okay, there we go.
It has edged up.
Hold on, guys.
Squirrel.
Here we go. All right. Let's see what this knucklehead has to say. And Jerome Powell, not a friend of the United States at all. This guy concerns me greatly. Let's hear what he has to say.
Good afternoon. My colleagues and I remain squarely focused on achieving our dual mandate goals of maximum employment and stable prices for the benefit of the American people. While the unemployment rate remains low, it has edged up. Job gains have slowed, and downside risks to employment have risen. At the same time, inflation has risen recently and remains somewhat elevated.
Welcome, Ozzy.
In support of our goals, and in light of the shift in the balance of risks, today the Federal Open Market Committee decided to lower our policy interest rate by 1/4 percentage point. We also decided to continue to reduce our securities holdings. I'll have more to say about monetary policy after briefly reviewing economic developments. Recent indicators suggest that growth of economic activity has moderated. GDP rose at a pace of around 1.5% in the first half of the year, down from 2.5% last year. The moderation in growth largely reflects a slowdown in consumer spending. In contrast, business investment in equipment and intangibles has picked up from last year's pace. Activity in the housing sector remains weak. In our summary of economic projections, the median participant projects GDP to rise 1.6% this year and 1.8% next year, a touch stronger than projected in June. In the labor market, the unemployment rate edged up to 4.3% in August, but remains little changed over the past year at a relatively low level. Payroll job gains have slowed significantly to a pace of just 29,000 per month over the past 3 months. A good part of the slowing likely reflects a decline in the growth of the labor force due to lower immigration and lower labor force participation. Even so, labor demand has softened, and the recent pace of job creation appears to be running below the break-even rate needed to hold the unemployment rate constant. In addition, wage growth has continued to moderate while still outpacing inflation. Overall, the marked slowing in both the supply of and demand for workers is unusual. In this less dynamic and somewhat softer labor market, the downside risks to employment appear to have risen. In our SEP, the median projection for the unemployment rate is 4.5% at the end of this year and edges down thereafter. Inflation has eased significantly from its highs in mid-2022, but remains somewhat elevated relative to our 2% longer-run goal. Estimates based on the Consumer Price Index and other data indicate that total PCE prices rose 2.7% over the 12 months ending in August, and that, excluding the volatile food and energy categories, core PCE prices rose 2.9%. These readings are higher than earlier in the year as inflation for goods has picked up. In contrast, disinflation appears to be continuing for services. Near-term measures of inflation expectations have moved up, on balance, over the course of this year on news about tariffs, as reflected in both market and survey-based measures. Beyond the next year or so, however, most measures of longer-term expectations remain consistent with our 2% inflation goal. The median projection in the SEP for total PCE inflation is 3.0% this year and falls to 2.6% in 2026 and to 2.1% in 2027. Our monetary policy actions are guided by our dual mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people. At today's meeting, the committee decided to lower the target range for the federal funds rate by 1/4 percentage point to 4 to 4.25%, and to continue reducing the size of our balance sheet. Changes to government policies continue to evolve, and their effects on the economy remain uncertain. Higher tariffs have begun to push up prices in some categories of goods, but their overall effects on economic activity and inflation remain to be seen. A reasonable base case is that the effects on inflation will be relatively short-lived, a one-time shift in the price level. But it is also possible that the inflationary effects could instead be more persistent, and that is a risk to be assessed and managed. Our obligation is to ensure that a one-time increase in the price level does not become an ongoing inflation problem. In the near term, risks to inflation are tilted to the upside and risks to employment to the downside, a challenging situation. When our goals are in tension like this, our framework calls for us to balance both sides of our dual mandate. With downside risks to employment having increased, the balance of risks has shifted. Accordingly, we judged it appropriate at this meeting to take another step toward a more neutral policy stance. With today's decision, we remain well positioned to respond in a timely way to potential economic developments. We will continue to determine the appropriate stance of monetary policy based on the incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. In our SEP, FOMC participants wrote down their individual assessments of an appropriate path for the federal funds rate, based on what each participant judges to be the most likely scenario for the economy. The median participant projects that the appropriate level of the federal funds rate will be 3.6% at the end of this year,
I don't know if you guys understand any of this
3.4% at
stuff.
the end of
I don't.
2026, and 3.1%
Yeah, it looks
at the
like
end of
fake data. I'm
2027.
awesome. I agree.
This path is
Like,
1/4
really?
percentage point lower than projected in June.
Are we supposed to believe anything
As is always the
this dude
case,
says?
these individual forecasts are subject to uncertainty,
Forecasts,
and they're
really?
not a committee plan or decision.
We think you
Policy
forecast
is not
anything.
on a preset course.
I agree. Awesome.
The Fed has been assigned two goals for monetary policy: maximum employment and stable prices. We remain committed to supporting maximum employment, bringing inflation sustainably to our 2% goal, and keeping longer-term inflation expectations well anchored. Our success in delivering on these goals matters to all Americans.
Oops, sorry.
Expectations well anchored. Our success in delivering on these goals matters to all Americans. We understand that our actions affect communities, families, and businesses across the country. Everything we do is in service to our public mission, and we at the
Exactly
Fed will do
right.
everything we can to achieve our maximum employment and price stability goals.
He's never
Thank
been
you.
good
I
at the
look forward to
forecast
our
before,
discussion.
so I don't know why it would be now.
Great. Thank you. Chris Rugaber, Associated Press. As you know, Fed Governor Stephen Myron has kept his position at the White House, even as he's joined the Fed board. This is the first time, I believe, the Fed's board has had someone with executive branch ties in decades. Does this compromise the Fed's independence from day-to-day politics? And relatedly, how can you maintain the public's perception the Fed is politically independent with this dynamic? Thank you.
So we did welcome a new committee member today, as we always do, and the committee remains united in pursuing
You're right,
our dual mandate goals.
He's not a friend of
We're
our
strongly
country.
committed to maintaining our independence, and beyond that, I really don't have anything to share.
Okay, and then just as a quick follow-up, I'm sorry, can you and other Fed officials have spoken extensively about the impact of tariffs on inflation, although perhaps with many companies appearing to eat the tariffs, tariffs may be impacting the labor market and other parts of the economy instead. Do you see that as a possible outcome here, that tariffs are the reason we're seeing some slowing, particularly in the labor market, rather than in inflation?
You know, it's certainly possible. You know, we're beginning to see, we have begun to see goods prices showing through into higher inflation. And actually, the increase in goods prices
Captain
accounts
Blackbird
for
knows.
most of the increase in inflation, or perhaps all of the increase in inflation over the course of this year. Those are not very large effects at this point, and we do expect them to continue to build over the course of the rest of the year and into next year. And you know, it's also possible that there may be effects on employment, but that I would say if you're looking at why employment is doing what it's doing, that's much more about the change in immigration. So the supply of workers has obviously come way down. There's very little growth, if any, in the supply.
Okay. Vibe. I got to read what Vibe says. If that were true, it wouldn't have slowed down back in 2024. They've already revised the employment numbers down 1 million. Almost has nothing to do with tariffs. Exactly. And what did he just say? I'm going to rewind him. He is blaming the illegals leaving. Wow. What? Listen to this again. I'm sorry. I got to rewind that. This is just too much.
You know, it's also possible that there may be effects on employment, but that I would say if you're looking at why employment
Look at
is
that
doing what it's
glitchiness.
doing, that's
What's
much
that?
more about the change in immigration.
Change
So
in
the supply
immigration.
of workers has obviously come way down. There's very little growth, if any, in the supply of workers.
Supply of workers. Are you kidding me?
And at the same time, demand for workers has also come down quite sharply. And to the point where we see what I've called a curious balance. It's, typically when we say things are in balance, that sounds good. But in this case, the balance is because both supply and demand have come down quite sharply. Now demand coming down a little more sharply because we now see the unemployment rate edging up.
Nick Timrose of the Wall Street Journal. Chair Powell, do economic conditions and the balance of risks no longer warrant a restrictive policy setting?
So I don't think we can say that. But what we can say is this, that over the course of this year, we've kept our policy at a restrictive level, and people have different views, but a clearly restrictive level, I would say. So, and we were able to do that over the course of this year because the labor market was in very solid condition with strong job creation and all those things.
Good point,
I
Spirit.
think if you go back to April and now look at the revised job creation numbers for May, June, July, and August, I can no longer say that. So what that means is that the risks were clearly tilted toward inflation. I would say they're moving toward equality. Maybe they're not quite out of equality. We don't need to know that. But we do know that they've moved meaningfully toward greater equality, the risks between the two goals, and that suggests that we should be moving in the direction of neutral, and that's what we did today.
Under what circumstances would a larger than 25 basis points rate cut be warranted, and how seriously was that option entertained at your meeting this week?
There wasn't widespread support at all for a 50 basis point cut today. I think we've done very large rate hikes and very large rate cuts in the last 5 years, and you tend to do those at a time when you feel that policy is out of place and needs to move quickly to a new place. That's not at all what I feel certainly now. I feel like our policy has been doing the right thing so far this year. I think we were right to wait and see how tariffs and inflation and the labor market evolved. I think we're now reacting to the much lower level of job creation and other evidence of softening in the labor market and saying, well, those risks are maybe not fully balanced, but moving in the direction of balance now. And so that won't.
Okay, I gotta stop him now because I can't even with these lies. I mean, really out and out lies. The Fed cuts interest rates to stimulate the economy and boost employment by making borrowing cheaper for consumers and businesses, encouraging spending and investment. He did the opposite. Here we go.
It's a change in policy.
Colby Smith with the New York Times. Should we be viewing today's cut as the committee taking out some insurance against the possibility that the labor market is at risk of weakening? Or is it the committee's view that the dynamics of a downturn are already in place? I guess I'm just trying to square the shift in the rate forecast in the SEP towards more cuts than just 3 months ago with the fact that the forecast for unemployment didn't change.
Yeah, I think you could think of this in a way as a risk management
glitchiness.
cut, because if you look at the SEP, actually, the projections for growth this year and next actually ticked up just a little bit, and inflation and unemployment didn't really move much. So what's different now? What's different now is that you see a very different picture of the risks to the labor market.
To promote
You've seen,
economic growth.
we were looking at 150,000 jobs a month at the time of the last meeting, and now we see the revisions and we see the new numbers. And I don't want to put too much emphasis on payroll job creation, but it's just one of the things that suggests that the labor market is really cooling off. And that tells you that it's time to take that into account in our policy.
So just looking at the SEP, once again, the median participant has inflation higher than previously expected by the end of next year, and the Fed not getting back to the 2% target until 2028. So I guess I'm just wondering how you characterize the risk to price pressures of kicking off a series of cuts at this point.
Yeah, so I would look at it this way. We fully understand and appreciate that we need to remain fully committed to restoring 2% inflation on a sustained basis, and we will do that. At the same time, we've got to weigh the risks to the two goals. And I would say since April, to me, the risks of higher and more persistent inflation have probably become a little less. And that's partly because the labor market has softened, GDP growth has slowed. So I would just say that the risks there have been less than one might think. And in terms of the labor market, what we're seeing is unemployment is still low, it's still a relatively low rate, but we're seeing downside risks.
Michael McKee from Bloomberg Radio and Television. I'm a little confused by your explanation of the Fed cutting rates because of unemployment. If you think that most of what's happening in the employment area is related to immigration, which
Good
your
question.
rate cuts wouldn't address, how do you see that as more important than inflation, which has remained almost a full percentage
Thank you.
point
Good
above your target?
question.
Well, I was saying that what's happening in the labor market has more to do with immigration than it has to do with tariffs. That was the question I was answering. So I wouldn't say that all of what's happening in the labor market is due to tariffs. I mean, you clearly have a slowing due to immigration. You clearly have a slowing in demand, which is now perhaps more than that in supply, and we know that because the unemployment rate has ticked up. So, that's what I meant by that.
Like a follow-up, every year since 2015, the SEP has forecast that you would hit your target 2 years later. And this year, this SEP says you're going to hit your target 2 years later. 2% does not seem to be in sight. Does that suggest that the 2% target is not really achievable? And does this present any credibility problems
I
for
love
you
this guy.
in telling people that that's what you're going to do if you can never reach it?
Thank you.
Well, I mean, you're right. It does say we're going to get to 2% inflation in 2028, at the end of 28. But that's literally how you put the projections together. You're writing down a rate path, which is designed to create, over the course of the SEP, time frame, 2% inflation and maximum employment too. So that's all that is. No one really knows where the economy will be in 3 years. But the nature of the exercise is to write down policy that you believe would return to the 2% goal over the
Oh my God, do you guys hear this? This guy is literally saying, we make these predictions, they don't mean anything. We never know. Really? Really? This is insane. This is insane. Jerome Powell, you need to stop with your lies. Here you go. Sorry, guys.
at least by the end of the exercise.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth Schulze with ABC News. The latest inflation report shows that prices are still going up across key categories for many households, including groceries. What will the Fed do if prices pick up more?
So our expectation, and you can see this consistently through the year, has been that inflation will move up this year, but that the basically because of the effects on goods prices from tariffs, but that those will turn out to be a one-time price increase as opposed to creating an inflationary process. That's been our forecast. Pretty much all the individual forecasts say that. We can't just assume that, though, right? We have to. Our job is literally to make sure that that is what happens, and we will do that job. Right now, the situation we're in is that we see inflation. We continue to expect it to move up, maybe not as high as we would have expected it to move up a few months ago. The pass-through of the tariffs into inflation has been slower and smaller. The labor market has softened. So the case for there being a persistent inflation outbreak is less. And so that's why we think it's time for us really to acknowledge that the risks to the other mandate have grown and that we should move in the direction of neutral. So what will we do? We'll
Okay, again, sorry guys. By the way, I had to let you know that the live stream is coming from the Associated Press. And the Associated Press is glitching out like mad. Do you guys see this, all this glitchy stuff? And I'm like, ooh, if I ever thought I was watching a movie, it's right now. Yeah, your quantum reality, yeah, is not wrong. With the deficit the size we have, interest rates should be 12%. Oh, it's insane. I don't know. Welcome, Cold Cat. I hope you'll subscribe and come back. Okay, let's get back.
do what we need to do, but we have two mandates and we try to balance them. For a long time, our framework says that when our two goals are in tension, and this is quite an unusual situation, how do we decide what to do? Because our tools can't do two things at once. What we do is we ask how far is each from the goal and how long is it expected to get to the goal. So, and then we think about those things and we see, as I mentioned, our policy had been really skewed toward inflation for a long time, really.
I'm sorry, all I hear is blah, 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 we make it up, blah, 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 we make it up, blah, 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 we do what we want, we make it up.
Now we see that there's downside risk clearly in the labor market, and so we're moving in the direction of more neutral policy.
How concerned are you about the slowdown in the jobs market for households at home, especially younger Americans struggling to land a job?
So it's an interesting labor market, and obviously we think it's appropriate that we reduce our rates so that we become more neutral, which presumably will be better for the labor market. You see people who are sort of more at the margins, so kids coming out of college and younger people, minorities are having a hard time finding jobs. The overall job finding rate is very, very low. However, the layoff rate is also very low. So you've got a low firing, low hiring environment. And the concern is that if you start to see layoffs, the people who are laid off there won't be a lot of hiring going on. So that could very quickly flow into higher unemployment. In a healthier economy, healthier labor market, there would be jobs for those people. But now the hiring rate is very, very low. So that's been a growing concern over the last few months. And it's one of the reasons why we think it's appropriate that we begin to shift our policy focus toward a more balanced one.
Steve Leisman, CNBC. Mr. Chair, in the past, during rate cuts, you used the word recalibration. And I wonder if you pointedly did not use it this time. And in fact, when you said policy is not on a preset course, did you mean that as sort of the opposite of recalibration? Are we meeting to meeting, data point by data point? Or are we in the process here of getting back to neutral? Thank you.
So I think we're in a meeting by meeting situation. We're going to be looking at the data. Let me say a word about the SEP really here. So we often point this out. What the SEP is it's an accumulation of the individual projections of 19 people, showing what they believe at a particular moment in time to be the most likely path for the economy and thus the appropriate path for monetary policy as well. And as you know, we don't debate or try to agree on what that is. We just write them down and accumulate them. We do sometimes discuss them. And so we always say we're not on a preset path, and we really mean that. The actual decisions we make are going to be based on the incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks at the time the decisions are actually made. So
19 people.
You will have seen that we have 10 participants out of 19 who wrote down 2 or more cuts for the remainder of the year, and 9 who wrote down fewer than, in fact, in a good number of cases, no more cuts. So rather than looking at this as certainty, I would encourage people, as always, to look at the SEP as through the lens of probability. And so there are different possible outcomes and likelihoods rather than this one is certain and this one isn't happening. So that's what I would say.
Thank you for getting to my follow-up question. Is the dispersion in the outlook a sign of uncertainty of policy in the meetings to come? Thank you.
You know, it is such an unusual situation. Ordinarily, when the labor market is weak, inflation is low, and when the labor market is really...
All right, you guys, I just want to add something in here, sorry. But this is important that we do try to understand this. And I think for once, I'm seeing journalists actually asking good questions, so I'm loving that. But do you guys know what the SEP is? Because I don't. And so I'm going to explain it to you from what I'm finding here. Again, could be right, could be wrong, but this is right. The SEP most commonly stands for Simplified Employee Pension Plan, an employer-sponsored retirement account for small businesses. I mean, is that what they're talking about? Is that what the SEP is? Because that's what's coming up on the irs.gov. So if anybody understands it, I don't. I'm not a financial journalist, never have been. Actually, sometimes I'm still counting on my 10 fingers. So, yeah, your girl's not one of those journalists anyway, but it's interesting, and we do need to understand it. So if anybody else can explain SEP for me, I'm only coming up with simplified employment pension IRA. So if that's what they're talking about, then they're talking about yours and my retirement. Hi, Todd. Hi, Craig. I don't know what you're testing, but we're here. So let's go
Strong,
back
that's
to
when
it.
you gotta be careful about inflation. So we have a situation where we have two-sided risk, and that means there's no risk-free path. And so it's quite a difficult situation for policymakers. And it's not at all surprising to me that you have a range of views. It's not so much about having different views for the path of the economy, but it's partly that. But it's also partly about what's the right thing to do in light of the tension between the two goals. How do you weight them? How worried are you about one versus the other? And so it's natural. I think it would actually be surprising if you didn't have a pretty wide range of views based, in this kind of highly unusual situation, and we do. So, but we get together, we discuss, we have a great discussion, and then we decide what to do and we act. But you're right there that it's a wide dispersion of views, and I think that's understandable and natural in the current situation.
Hi, Victoria
thank
Guida with
you,
Politico.
Holly. Thank you.
You've talked a lot about Fed independence and the
Only
importance of it
economic
over the years. But as markets have questions about what exactly President Trump's intentions are with the Fed, what would you point to as the things they should be watching to determine that the Fed is still making decisions based on, the economic outlook rather than
This is a
political
great question
considerations?
too.
Look, it's deeply in our culture to do our work based on the incoming data and never consider anything else. That's just everybody who's at the Fed really feels strongly about that way. So, you'll know it by the way we talk about what we're doing, by the speeches that people give, by the decisions that we make. You'll know that we're just still going to do that. That's all we do. And we don't frame these questions at all or see them in terms of political outcomes. I think when you get to another part of Washington, everything is seen through the lens of, does it help or hurt this political party, this politician? That's the framework. And I think people find it hard to believe that is not at all the way we think about things at the Fed. We're taking a longer perspective. We're trying to, serve the American people as best we can. So I think you would be able to tell. I don't believe we'll ever get to that place. I would say we're doing our work exactly as we always have now. And people they're making their arguments, and we're having a great discussion around these challenging issues. So,
Do you see the court case around Lisa Cook as being related to questions of Fed independence?
I see it as a court case that it would be inappropriate for me to comment on.
I'm looking that up, guys.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Edward Lawrence from Fox Business. So we saw the preliminary benchmark revisions down 911,000. The revisions for June were the first negative revisions we've seen since December of 2020. How can the Fed base important decisions on rate and what to do with the interest rates on data that seems to be, as you've called it in the past, noisy?
So on the QCEW, the revision that we saw was almost exactly what we expected. It was amazing how close the expectation was. So, and the reason for that is, for the last bunch of quarters, there's been almost a predictable overcount. And I think the Bureau of Labor Statistics really does understand this, and they're working hard to fix it. It's got to do, of course, it has something to do with low response rates, but it's also got to do with what's called the birth-death model, because a good amount of job creation happens around new companies, and how many go out of business, how many are founded. And it's just really hard. You can't survey for that. You've got to have a model that predicts that. And it's quite difficult to do, especially when the economy is undergoing big changes. So, and they've been working on that and are making progress on it. But the data we get is still well good enough for us to do our work. To the extent we have issues around data right now, it's about low response rates. That's happened all over all over, really. Response rates are just lower to surveys now, both in and out of the government. And it's no great secret. We want higher response rates, and we need those to have, less volatile data. And the way to get that is to make sure that the agencies that collect the data have sufficient resources to drive higher response rates. It's not a complicated problem, but that's what it takes. It's not a mystery. That's what it takes. The other thing I'll say, Edward, is in the case of the job creation, the response rate is quite low for the first month, or lower for the first month. By the time you get to the second or third month, you're still collecting responses for that last month, for that prior month. And you get to the place where the data are much more reliable by the second and certainly the third month. So it's not that we don't get the data, it's just that we get it a little later.
But for the benchmarks, if that holds, it's 51% of the jobs that we thought were there weren't really there. Shows a weaker job market coming into this year. If you had had that information, would it have changed your mind related to where the interest rates should be? Should there have been a cut earlier?
We have to live life looking through the windshield rather than the rearview mirror, as you know. And all I can tell you is we see where we are now, and we take appropriate action, and we took that appropriate action today.
For those of you just coming on, the Fed has raised their interest rates 0.25%. It's not much. Okay, then.
Thanks. Howard Schneider with Reuters. So, as you mentioned a minute ago, some margins of the job market would suggest that the slide's already happening. Black unemployment rate in August was above 7%, declining work week, difficulty among college graduates finding work, rising youth unemployment. Why do you think a 0.25 percentage point now is going to arrest that?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't say that I thought a 0.25 point would make a huge difference to the economy, but you've got to look at the whole path of rates, right? And the market's has already been baking in expectations. I mean, our market works through expectations, right? So I think our policy path really does matter. And I think it's important that we use our tools to support the labor market when we do see signs like that. I did mention that. You see minority unemployment going up. You see younger people who are more vulnerable economically, more susceptible to economic cycles. That's one of the reasons, in addition to just overall lower
rate cut. You're right.
payroll job creation, that shows you that at the margin, the labor market is weakening. I would also point to labor force participation. Some part of the significant decline in labor force participation over the last year has probably been cyclical in nature rather than just the usual aging process. So we put all those together, and we see that the labor market is softening, and we don't need it to soften anymore, don't want it to. So we use our tools, and it starts with a 25 basis point rate cut, but the market's also pricing in a rate path. I'm not blessing what the market's doing at all. I'm just saying it's not just one action.
As a follow-up to that, the growth mix right now seems very concentrated in investment and on the consumer spending side in the higher income groups. Do you feel that that's an unsustainable mix for the economy moving forward?
I wouldn't say that. I mean, you're right. Those are two. We're getting unusually large amounts of economic activity through the AI build out and corporate investment. I don't know how long that will go on. No one does. In terms of spending, you saw that the consumer spending numbers were well above expectations, and that may well be skewed toward higher earning consumers. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence to suggest that. Nonetheless, it's spending. So, I mean, I think the economy is moving along. Economic growth is going to be 1.5% or better this year, maybe a little better. Forecasts have been coming up, as you can see. So, labor market unemployment is low, but downside risks, but it's still a low unemployment rate. So, that's how we see it.
Hi, Stephanie Rule, MSNBC. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has said that the Federal Reserve suffers from mission creep and institutional bloat. He's now calling for an independent review. Would you support an independent review, or are you open to any sort of reform in any areas of the Fed?
Another good question.
Of course, I'm not going to comment on anything the Secretary says or really any other officer says. So in terms of reform at the Fed, we just went through a lengthy and I think very successful process of updating our monetary policy framework. I would say there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes around the assets we have in the Federal Reserve Bank, Federal Reserve System, and at the board. Are they the right size? We're actually going through a 10% headcount reduction through the whole Fed, including the board and all the reserve banks. The employment at the Fed at the end of that will be basically at the same level it was more than 10 years ago. So we will have had zero job growth for more than a decade when we're finished with that, and I think we'll probably do more than that. So I think we're certainly open to constructive criticism and ways to do our jobs better.
But not an independent review?
We're certainly open to always trying to do better.
Mr. Chairman, Neil Irwin with Axios. There's been some debate lately on whether AI is already starting to affect the labor market in terms of lower labor demand, higher productivity by contrast. Do you buy that? And if that is true, does that have implications for the monetary policy setting?
Question.
So there's great uncertainty around that. I think my view, which is also a bit of a guess, but widely shared, I think, is that you are seeing some effects, but it's not the main thing driving it. And so particular focus on young people coming out of college. And yeah, there may be something there. It may be that companies or other institutions that have been hiring younger people right out of college are able to use AI more than they had in the past. That may be part of the story. It's also part of the story, though, that job creation more broadly has slowed down. The economy has slowed down. And so it's probably a number of things. But yeah, it's probably a factor. Hard to say how big it is.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. What evidence do you see of tariffs showing up in inflation?
Well, if you can take goods, just sort of the broad goods category, and last year, goods inflation was negative. If you go back 25 years, that was the typical thing, was that goods inflation was, goods prices generally went down, even adjusting for quality. So that was not the case during the pandemic, of course. Goods inflation went very high, but we had essentially returned to zero or slightly negative inflation. Now, I think goods inflation over the course of the past year is 1.2%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a big change. So we think, analysts have different views, but we think it's contributing, 0.3 or 0.4 or something like that to the current core PCE inflation reading, which is 2.9%. So it's contributing. What seems to be happening is that, the tariffs are mostly not being paid by exporters, mostly being paid by really the companies that sit between the exporter and the consumer. So if you buy something and you sell it through retail or you use it to make a product, you're probably taking a lot of those costs on and not able to pass it fully along to the consumer yet. That appears to be what we're seeing. All of those companies and entities in the middle, they'll tell you that they have every intention of passing that through in time, but they're not doing that now. To the consumer, the pass-through has been pretty small. It's been slower and smaller than we thought. But the evidence is very clear that there's some pass-through.
I also wanted to ask if you could share with us the conditions under which you might consider leaving the Fed in May.
I have nothing new on that for you today.
Hi, Katerina Saraiva with Bloomberg News. I just wanted to follow up on one of your answers just a couple minutes ago. We've often heard you talk about how you and your colleagues, do not think about politics. This does not enter the room. But one of your new colleagues does come from this world, right, where everything is seen through this framework of politics and of what party is being helped, and that person is still employed by the White House. How can markets and the public interpret some of his speeches, for example, and then some of, the forecasts that we see today. I mean, the median for this year was moved because of the introduction of his forecast. I'm talking about the number of rate cuts seen this year. What do you say to markets and the public that are trying to interpret, what you guys are saying?
That's a great question.
So there's 19 participants of whom 12 vote, as you know, on a rotating basis. So no one voter, can really, the only way for any voter to really move things around is to be incredibly persuasive. And the only way to do that in the context in which we work is to make really strong arguments based on the data and one's understanding of the economy. That's really all that matters. And that's how it's going to work. And I think that is the way the institution, if that's in the DNA of the institution, that's not going to change.
And then I wanted to ask about a Gallup poll that showed that Americans now have more confidence in the president than the Federal Reserve when it comes to doing what's right for the economy. Why do you think that is, and what's your response? What's your message to the public?
Our response is we're going to do everything we can to use our tools to achieve the goals that Congress has given us, and we're not going to get distracted by anything. So I think that's what we're going to do. We're just going to keep doing our jobs.
We're going to keep on screwing the American people. That's what he just said. We don't care.
Claire Jones, Financial Times. Given the range of views expressed prior to the meeting, I think there was a lot less dissent today than a lot of people expected. It'd be good to know just what you think the drivers were of coming to that very strong consensus in the meeting, and also on the flip side to just explain why the dot plots are really so scattered between, someone even expecting rates to end up higher by the end of the year to 5 cuts. I mean, what were the kind of range of views you heard about, on one side, why there was so much support for a cut today, and on the flip side, why there's so much divergence about what comes next?
So I think there's quite a wide assessment that the situation has changed with respect to the labor market. Whereas we could still say, and did say in July, at the time of the July meeting, that the labor market was in solid condition, and we could point to 150,000 jobs per month and many other things. I think that the new data that we've had, and it's not just payrolls, it's other things as well, suggests that there really is meaningful downside risk. I said there was downside risk then, but I think that downside risk is now a reality, and there's clearly more downside risk. So I think that's broadly accepted. And so that meant different things for different people. Some wrote down, almost everyone wrote down, supported this cut, and some supported more cuts and some didn't, as you will see from the dot plot. So that's just the way it is. I mean, people have, you have people who take this work very seriously, think about it all the time, do their work, discuss it with our colleagues. We endlessly discuss this between ourselves, and then we have a meeting where we put it all out on the table, and this is what you get. And you're right, there's a range of views in the dots, and I think that's, like I said, very unsurprising given the quite unusual, historically unusual nature of the challenges that we face. But let's remember, though, the unemployment rate's 4.3%. The economy's growing at 1.5%. So it's not a bad economy or anything like that. We've seen much more challenging economic times. But from a policy standpoint, the standpoint of what we're trying to accomplish, it's challenging to know what to do. There are, as I mentioned earlier, there are no risk-free paths now. It's not incredibly obvious what to do. So we have to keep our eye on inflation. At the same time, we cannot ignore and must keep our eye on maximum employment, which is those are our two equal goals. And you will see that there are a range of views on what to do. Nonetheless, we came together today at the meeting and acted with a high degree of unity.
Thank you. Archie Hawken, The Economist. You mentioned earlier that job creation was running below your guess at its break-even rate. I'd be curious to hear a bit more about that and where you think the break-even rate is.
So there are many different ways to calculate it, and none of them is perfect. But it's clearly come way down. You could say it's somewhere between 0 and 50,000, and you'd be right or wrong. I mean, there's just many different ways to do it. So wherever it was, 150,000, 200,000 a few months ago, it's come down quite significantly, and that's because a very lower amount of people are joining the labor force. The labor force really not growing much at this point, and that's a lot of where the supply of labor was coming from over the last 2 or 3 years. So we're not getting that now. We've got much lower demand. It's interesting that supply and demand have really come down together so far, except now we do have unemployment ticking up outside, just one tick outside of the range where it's been for a year. 4.3% is still a low level, but I think this speedy decline in both supply and demand has certainly gotten everyone's attention.
If I may, you mentioned the downside risk to employment a fair amount, but it's striking that measures of kind of activity and output for the third quarter, those that we have, seem pretty strong. The Atlanta Fed's GDP now is very strong. You mentioned strong PCE numbers as well. How do you square those things? Is there a chance actually could be upside risk to the labor market if those activity measures are right?
Well, that would be great. We'd love that to happen. So I don't know that you see a big tension there, but it's gratifying to see that economic activity is holding in, and it's a good bit from consumption. It looks like consumption was stronger than expected. What we got earlier this week, I guess. And also we're getting a fairly narrow sector is producing a lot of economic activity, which is the AI build out and business investment. So we watch all of it, and I would say we did move up the median for growth for this year. Actually moved up in the SEP between the June and September SEPs. So and really the inflation and labor market didn't change much. It's really the risks that we're seeing to the labor market that were the focus of today's decision.
Nicole. Hi, Nicole Goodkind with Barron's. Thank you for taking my question. Given the cumulative impact of high interest rates on the housing sector, I'm wondering how concerned you are that current rate levels are exacerbating housing affordability issues and potentially hindering household formation and wealth accumulation for a segment of the population?
Housing is an interest-sensitive activity, so it's at the very center of monetary policy. When the pandemic hit and we cut rates to zero, the housing companies were incredibly grateful, and it was really, they said that was the only thing that kept them going, was that we cut so aggressively and provided credit and things like that, and they were able to finance because we did that. The other side of that is when inflation gets high and we raise rates, and you're right, it does burden the housing industry, and so rates have come down a bit, and as that happens, we don't set mortgage rates, but our policy rate changes do tend to affect mortgage rates, and that has been happening, and that'll of course raise demand. Lower borrowing rates for builders will help will help supply, and so some of that should happen. I think most analysts think that it would have to be pretty big changes for it to matter a lot, for the big changes in rates to matter a lot for the housing sector. And the other thing is by achieving maximum employment and price stability, that's a strong economy. That's a good economy for housing. And then the last thing I'll say is, there's a deeper problem here. There's not a cyclical problem that the Fed can address, and that just is a pretty much nationwide housing shortage. Or a lot of places in the country just don't have enough housing for people, and all of the areas around metropolitan areas like Washington, for example, are very built up, and so you're having to build farther and farther out, and so that's where it is.
And just a quick follow-up, during the last SEP, or the press conference following the last SEP, you seemed to indicate that policymakers lacked conviction about their projections, and I'm wondering if you still feel that way.
Forecasting is very difficult even in placid times, and as I've mentioned before, forecasters are a humble lot with much to be humble about. So I think right now is a particularly challenging time, even more uncertain than usual. And so I don't know any forecaster anywhere, really. Ask any of the forecasters whether they have great confidence in their forecast right now. I think they'll honestly say no.
Thank you, Chair Powell. Jennifer Schonberger with Yahoo Finance. If you're cutting rates, why continue to reduce the size of your balance sheet, then pause the unwinding?
Well, I think we're cutting the size of our balance sheet quite marginally now. As you know, with the balance sheet, we're still in an abundant reserves condition, and we've said that we would stop somewhat above an ample reserves level. That's where we are, and we're getting closer to that. We're monitoring it very carefully. We don't think that has at all significant macroeconomic effects. These are pretty small numbers moving around inside a giant economy. The level of runoff is not very large, so I wouldn't attribute macroeconomic consequences to that at this point.
And at his recent confirmation hearing, Stephen Myron brought up that the Fed actually has 3 mandates from Congress, not just jobs and stable prices, but also moderate long-term interest rates. So what does Congress mean by moderate long-term interest rates? How should we understand that when we see the 10-year Treasury moving? And how do you think about this part of the mandate when policy choices like rate cuts or balance sheet reductions affect the long end of the yield curve?
So we always think of it as the dual mandate, maximum employment and price stability, for a long time, because we think moderate long-term interest rates are something that will result from stable inflation, low and stable inflation, and maximum employment. So we haven't thought about that for a very long time as a third mandate that requires independent action. So that's where that is. And there's no thought of, as far as I'm concerned, there's no thought of considering that, considering that we somehow incorporate that in as something in a different way.
Thanks, Chair Powell. Matt Egan from CNN. We recently learned that average FICO credit scores are down this year by 2 points, the most since 2009 during the Great Recession, and delinquencies are high for car loans, personal loans, credit cards. How concerned, if at all, are you about the health of consumer finances, and do you expect today's cut will help?
So, we're aware of that. I think default rates have been kind of ticking up, and we do watch that. They're not at a level, I don't believe they're at a level where overall they're terribly concerning, but it is something that we watch. Lower rates should support economic activity. I don't know that one rate cut will have, a visible effect on that, but over time, a strong economy with a strong labor market is what we're aiming for, and stable prices. So that should help.
Just to follow up, this rate cut is coming at a time when the stock market is at or near all-time highs, and some valuation metrics are elevated historically. Is there a risk that cutting rates could overheat financial markets, potentially fueling a bubble?
We're tightly focused on our goals, right? And our goals are maximum employment and price stability. And so we take the actions that we take with an eye on those goals. Separately, and that's why we did what we did today. Separately, we monitor financial stability very, very carefully. And, I would say it's a mixed picture, but households are in good shape, banks are in good shape. Overall, households are still in good shape in the aggregate. And I know that people at the lower end of the income spectrum are under pressure, obviously. But from a financial stability perspective, we monitor that picture. We don't have a view that there's a right or wrong level of asset prices for any particular financial asset, but we monitor the whole picture, really looking for structural vulnerabilities, and I would say those are not elevated right now.
Jean, we'll go to you for the last question.
Hi, Chair Powell. Jean Young with MNI Market News. I wanted to ask about inflation expectations. You've said the Fed can't take the stability of inflation expectations for granted. You mentioned at the short run they've gone up a little bit. I wonder if you can talk a bit about that. And then also at the long run, wondering, do you see evidence that the debate over Fed independence and the growing deficit is putting pressure on inflation expectations?
So as you said, shorter-term inflation expectations have tended to respond to near-term inflation. So if inflation goes up, inflation expectations will predict that it takes just a little while to get back down. Fortunately, throughout this period, longer-term inflation expectations, both break even in the markets and almost all of the longer-term surveys, Michigan being a bit of an outlier lately, have been just rock solid in terms of running at levels that are consistent with 2% inflation over time. So we don't take that for granted. We actually assume that our actions have a real effect on that, and that we need to continually show and also discuss our commitment to 2% inflation. And so you'll hear us doing that. We're, as I mentioned, it's a difficult situation because we have risks that are both affecting the labor market and inflation. Those are our two goals, and so we have to balance those two. When they're both at risk, we have to balance them, and that's really what we're trying to do. Your latter part of your question was about independence. I don't see market participants. I don't see that that's something they're factoring in right now in terms of setting interest rates. Thanks very much.
Okay, that's the end of that. Oops, sorry. All right, you guys. Yeah, looks like the Fed is completely politicized. Am I right? And yes, people putting their purchases on credit cards is making it look like people are spending money, but they're spending money they don't have. I'm guilty of it myself. If it wasn't for credit cards, I honestly don't know what I would do. And yeah, the American people have been destroyed by the past 4 years under the Biden administration. And those of you who have TDS and hate President Trump, what are you doing? Crazy. Yeah, I can see why you'd cut your cards up. But right now, I actually can't. So, yep, I'm one of those people living on the credit card situation. I'm living within my means, but I'm just being careful, that I don't have nothing. So I've got the 0 interest credit cards. That's what I've been doing. Anyway, yeah, Austin, really? Did you see the past so-called president? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to blame the last 4 years. So, yeah. No, I am within my means. My credit cards are always on time. I pay them all off. So I'm doing fine. I'm just making sure that I do always have cash on hand. So that's why I'm using the credit cards, and it's working for me so far. So, but yeah, I am totally within my means. I'm not doing anything crazy. I've never actually been in debt before. This is the first time that I'm using the credit cards the way that I am, just to see. But anyway, I'm very responsible with my money, and if I don't have the money, I don't eat. That's what we do, which is fine. So thank you, Sergio. I'm glad you're here. You're right, quantum reality. I'm willing to bet that you are right about that. 85% of the people are in debt up to their next credit cards. Yes, I will totally agree with that. I, however, am not in debt so much as I can pay my bills, and I do pay my bills. And Johnny, I'm already right there. So I'm doing the best I can. I'm scraping along. Things are getting better all the time because I am now a publisher. I published this book that I wrote myself after publishing this book 10 years ago. No, Don, I don't live in my car. I live out of my car. Big difference. Just saying. But yeah, I'm a traveler. And I just published this book for Joshua Daniel Hayes. I did that myself because I am becoming a book publisher. This is my new career that I'm embarking on after being a journalist for the past 20 years. Yeah, sure, you saw me on police cams. Yeah, I've never been in trouble ever in my life, so there's that. Oh, here comes Jean. She likes to call everyone liars that she doesn't know. Okay. Jean thinks I'm lying about publishing books. But look, I published this one. I published this one. I published this one. So, and by the way, for those of you who like doubt that I'm a journalist, like why would I get on here and say I was a journalist for 40 years if I wasn't? But anyway, I wrote this book. There's my name. So yeah. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Doug. I appreciate it. Thank you, XRB. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, Jean, I think that you might be turning that about yourself. So a lot of people project, and when they call people liars and they don't even know them, then you know who the real liar is. So we know who you are, Jean. Yeah. Yes, any idiot can write a book. Sure, Larry. How many books have you written? So thank you, dog. And by the way, I'm going to have 2 book signings this week, one on Saturday in Blairsville and the second one in Cranberry Township. So yeah, I know you don't like my hat. You're triggered. Oh my. I support Donald Trump because I know the truth. The accusations are coming from left-wing media and they never tell the truth. So thank you, Sergio. Thank you, guys. All right, well, I just wanted to talk to y'all, just quickly let you know who I am. By the way, unlike other podcasters who sell other people's things, Jill sells her own books that she does all by herself. Yes, I'm a book publisher. I'm a book writer. Books galore, JillBooks.com. So I do it all by myself. I'm a one-woman show. So everything I do is of the utmost highest quality because Jill is a perfectionist. So it's wonderful being able to do my own thing and to become a book publisher. So I'm helping people actually publish their own books, which is so much fun. And it is so great to help other people realize their dreams. And that's what I'm doing. All right, gator bait. What is gator bait? I don't know, but I love gators. I love them. My husband, may he rest in peace. He's been gone 3 years now. He passed away on September 30th, back in 2022. Anyway, he was an animal wrangler. He actually wrestled alligators. I don't wrestle alligators. I don't go near alligators. I like to film the alligators in their wild habitats so you can see what alligators in the wild look like. There's no feeding alligators on the beach report, but we do go down into the swamp, all the way down into South Florida in the Everglades, and I will show you real gators. But not this month, because this month, JillBooks.com, I'm sorry, the beach report is up north in my old stomping grounds where I was a journalist for 18 years with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. So I'm up here doing my thing, actually working on a couple of cool stories that I'm probably going to publish in the Butler Eagle newspaper. So you can wait for that. I'll let you know when it happens. All right, you guys. Silly questions. All right, I'm going to say ciao for now. We will see you on the next beach report. By the way, just so you know, on Friday, we're going to be heading into Mars, Pennsylvania, where the mayor of Mars is going to take us around this really cool town. I think it's the only town in the world called Mars. And there's actually a spaceship there. And they actually have been working with NASA. So it's very cool over in Mars, Pennsylvania. We'll take you there on Friday morning. So stay tuned for that. All right. Yeah, Sharon, cult member right back at you, girlfriend. Oh boy, you guys are so triggered by my hat. Oh well, nothing I can do about it. I'm on unapologetically make America great again. All right, you guys. Don't really care what you have to say. So I love you, Patriots, and thank you for coming on my show and adding some common sense to the conversation because people today have gone crazy. All right, you guys, so good to see you all. See you on the next speech report. Ciao for now.